In this video we're going to install an external socket. This is a relatively easy job. There are a few different types. It is recommended that you get a decent make. I'm going to install these two, which are both made by BG. As you can see, both of these are waterproof and they are both suitable for use outside. This one's going on the back of the garage and that one is actually going on the front of the garage. Some of these are quite smart and you can see that that's got a stainless steel cover. It also has a light on to tell you when the socket is actually switched on. So that is very useful. I would not recommend putting one of these somewhere unless you can switch it off inside. What you don't want to do is leave your electric on unless you get one of these that is lockable, because you could get somebody coming and plugging something into that when you're on the property. This smaller one actually has a hasp at the bottom and you can put a padlock through that and you can actually lock it to prevent anybody using the socket without the key. It's absolutely critical when you install one of these that it is RCD protected. As you can see from this consumer unit, the sockets upstairs, downstairs and the garage are all RCD protected. That means that we can quite safely just wire this up to a 13 amp plug. If your sockets are not RCD protected, you will have to use an RCD plug on the end like that, or you can get one of the RCD protected sockets. If you want one of these wiring into an existing circuit, you are better off leaving that job to an electrician. So this version is actually available with a built-in RCD, just in case you don't already have your sockets RCD protected. But it is absolutely critical that an external socket is RCD protected. So this is the one that I'm going to fit. As you can see, it's quite well made and it is actually IP66 rated. And it does have a sealing gasket around it. Once you plug something into that, if you close the lid and then close the tabs, that will actually make it waterproof. So these are a very good idea. It's a lot better installing one of these than what it is using an extension lead or putting it through a window or a door, because they are a tripping hazard. And as I mentioned earlier, you can actually put a padlock through there and you can actually lock this one off. This is the inside of the garage and we've got a socket just there, and I actually want the socket on the other side of the wall. So I'm going to drill a hole somewhere below this socket. If you're doing this in your house and you've found a suitable socket where you can plug into, you do have to ensure that you know where the cables are. It's quite obvious here because it is in trunking, but if that wall was plastered you wouldn't know where the cable was that was feeding the socket. So you do need to find out where the cable is before you go drilling a hole through any kind of wall that has been plastered. You can of course use a cable detector or something like that, although some of them do not work all that well. In this example, we're just going to take a measurement from the windowsill, and we can see that if we go about a foot from the windowsill down, that will give us the correct height for the socket outside. We're just going to go out there now, we're just going to go and check that there's nothing in the way. So the cable for the socket is going to come out about there somewhere. It's now a good idea to put on some safety glasses. To drill the hole, I'm going to use this mains powered SDS drill. This has actually got a long drill bit in, which is long enough to go through the wall. I've actually put a mark on there, which will just indicate when I get about 2 inches away from the exterior of the wall. What I don't want to do is burst off the back of the brick, because SDS drills like this are very powerful. Once I've drilled through with this drill, I then need to drill through from the other side and this side with the larger diameter bit. So we're now through into the cavity. I'm now going to switch the hammer action off. So we're now at the other side. I'm now going to remove the drill bit. And then this time I'm going to use a 16mm drill bit. I'm now going to go through from this side and the other side so that both of the holes meet up. I've now cut a piece of PEX pipe, which is 15mm outside diameter. I'm going to use that to line the hole. So I'm just going to push that in there. And that should just be long enough to stick out the other side. So I'm just going to pre-drill these using a small drill bit, which is about 5mm. So I've now got a small SDS drill, and a 6mm drill bit is in there, which is for the red wall plugs. So I'm going to get the socket somewhere near level, and then I'm going to spot straight through one of the fixing holes. You can then knock a plug in there. And then, because this is outside, I'm using external screws. I'm just going to nip that up. Now that's level, we can just spot through the remaining 3 holes. Can now just remove that, then we can knock in the remaining 3 red plugs. I'm now going to run a bead of sealant around there. That will prevent any water from getting into the socket. You can then take the socket, push it in position, and then finally we can screw it to the wall. So I just screwed that to the wall with the drill on the lowest torque setting. So now I'm just going to put a bead around there, and then we're guaranteed nothing can get into the socket. Once we've done that, we can then take the rubber seals, we can push those in. They will ensure that no water can get into the socket. I'm also just going to put a bead around the pipe on the inside. We're now going to wire up the socket on the bench. It's the easiest way of doing it. Just got the earth connections, a live and the neutral. So I'm using a piece of flex for this, and this is 1.5mm square flex. That is about 2 feet long. Obviously we're only going to use about a foot of that, but that will enable me to cut some off and wire the plug onto the end of it. We now need to strip off some of the outer insulation. To do that, I'm just going to put it on the bench. I'm going to take a sharp knife, and I'm just going to score a faint line down the insulation. And I'm not pressing on too hard because I don't want to go all the way through it. Now I've done that, at the end I'm just going to push the knife in. I'm just going to cut all the way through the insulation there. Once you've done that, you can actually peel it back, and you can grab all 3 conductors and just pull them through the insulation where you've slit. Obviously we need to make sure that we get enough of the wires so that we can get that into position. I'm just going to pull a little bit more off. That should now be plenty. And I'm just going to remove the insulation. We now need to remove some of the insulation from the bare wires. Like so. I'm just going to do that on all 3 conductors. You will notice that I've made those quite long. I've actually done that on purpose. I'm actually going to twist all the strands together. And then I'm going to double that back on itself. Like so. That will give the screw a lot more conductor to grip. So I'm going to do that on all 3 wires. We can then put the brown into the brown or the live terminal and tighten that up. You can put the earth into the earth terminal. And the blue into the neutral terminal. And they all need to be nice and tight, but not so tight that you're going to shear them. Once you've done that, just try pulling each of the conductors out. If you can pull them out, you've not tightened the screws correctly in the first place. We're also going to use an additional piece of earth wire. That will just go from there to the earthing terminal on the back box, and that will prevent anybody from pulling it away from the wall. So again, I'll bend the conductor over, push that into the other earthing terminal, and then tighten that screw. We can now take the socket, feed the flex through to the other side. I'm just going to connect up this earth wire. You can then check that's tight. You can then carefully push all the wires in, ensuring none of them are going to get trapped. Once we've done that, we can then insert the 4 screws. We've now got all 4 screws in. We can then just go around there just to ensure that they are tight. You don't want to go too tight or else you will crack the plastic. We now just need to wire this into a standard 13 amp 3-pin plug. So once it's wired up, it should look something like that. What we need to do now is replace the top. Tighten up the screw in the centre. Once that's plugged in there, we can then switch that on. We can then lift up the cover. Just plug in a socket tester. Just switch that on. And then that is checking that the socket is wired correctly and also that we have a good earth loop impedance. So you can quite safely use that outside now. This does have useful indicators on, telling you when the socket is switched on. You can actually just see the red light through the cover there. Now that we know it's working correctly, we can push in the caps. We can now plug in an appliance, switch that on. If you want that to be IP66 rated, you need to close down the lid, close the tabs. That will then ensure that that is watertight. If you're not using this, it's a good idea to switch it off and unplug it. I hope you found this video useful. If you have and you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel.